We're back out here once again, and today we have a video that a lot of you have been waiting for. We're talking about everything you wanted to know about fall fishing from the bank. Stick around, you really don't want to miss this one. There we are. Come on, buddy. Stay down. Ooh, that's pretty good. Get up here, I want to ski you in so you can't... Boy, he's a pretty good fighter. That's a pretty good fight. Oh, he's a good fish. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And oftentimes, we as YouTube anglers need to be reminded that a large portion of our audience fishes from the bank. And while there's not such a huge difference between bank angling and boat angling as you might think, after all, we're targeting the same species, we're fishing the same water, we're looking for the same clues and the same things in order to target those bass. It's the nuances where you can find the biggest difference. And a lot of times those nuances are the huge thing that can determine a successful or not successful day on the water. So we want to cover some of those things. Those are what we want to look at, whether it's where I'm looking for the bass when I'm fishing from the bank, the lures that I'm using to target them, or what have you. But before we get started, I want to thank everyone who has visited my online store over at diamondbackbaits.myshopify.com. The overall support that you guys have shown has been great. I mean, it's more than I could have ever imagined. The orders keep pouring in and I'm just overjoyed. And the reviews that I've gotten, you guys are having great success with these jigs. So if you want to support the channel, head on over to that site. The link's going to be in the description and in the pinned comment below. And I know you're going to love these jigs, so check them out. Now, the first thing we want to talk about is finding those bass when you're fishing from the bank. And it's not that hard. It's the same thing as when you're fishing from the boat, especially in the fall. And in the fall, bank anglers are going to be at a distinct advantage because those bass are coming up from deep and heading to shallow water. Actually, they're heading to a lot of places you can't get to with a boat, but you can reach it from the bank quite easily. What am I looking for? Well, especially in the morning, I'm looking for those banks that are on the western side of my fishery, because those are going to be the earliest banks that are exposed to the sun. They're going to be the first ones to warm up, and they're going to be the first ones that you're going to see the activity of those fish. So on your fishery, if you can find the westward side of that bank, if you can get to the westward side of that lake, that's going to be your morning spot. That's going to be the spot where you're going to have the best amount of success. But as I've said before, we need to keep in mind how that sun moves across the sky, because it affects the shadows, it affects the shade lines on your lake. And the bass are very cognizant of it. They know exactly where that shade line is going to fall, and they know how to avoid it, and they know how to work with it. We've talked about finding rock piles, finding timber, finding places of hard structure and cover that are going to absorb that sunlight and radiate it out into the water. Now, concrete and rock are going to be the best. A riprap bank is going to be awesome for radiating that heat out into the water as the day goes on. But timber is also a great way to absorb sunlight and radiate it back out, especially some darker timber, some timber that might still have some bark on it. A lot of times that will help absorb that sunlight and radiate it back out in the water. So as a bank angler, you have a distinct advantage of being able to be right up next to the bank where those rock piles, those visible rock piles, those visible places of hard structure are going to be right there and much more accessible than from someone from a boat. So that's one of the things you want to keep in mind. Now, the different types of presentations, the different types of baits that we want to throw, that's where we want to adjust things just a little bit. And a lot of times it's not even as drastic as you might think it is. So when we're talking about what types of baits we want to throw, well, one of the biggest things that I like to throw from the bank is going to be a good old Texas rig. I love a Texas rigged worm from the bank because when I'm fishing from the bank, the water's much more shallow, obviously, unless you're fishing something that's got like a bluff wall or a steep bank, in which case you're going to have access to some deeper water more quickly, in which case a Texas rigged worm or a Texas rigged bait, something like this creature bait. This is a Christie critter, something like a brush hog, something like, you can get a beaver style bait. Texas rig baits, even a crawl, are going to be very good from the bank. It's very popular for a reason. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do that a lot of anglers don't do is I actually have a bobber stop. I've got this weight pegged. And the reason why I do that is because I have a lot of vegetation in my water. And if I don't have that there and that weight can slide freely, believe it or not, this is going to get gummed up with a whole bunch of vegetation. And the way that I'm fishing this, you've seen me do it before, is I do a very deliberate side sweep. I don't bring it up and over like a lot of guys do, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially if that's what's giving you success. But I'm looking to maintain that bottom contact. That's why I use a bit heavier weight. I'm using a 1/4 ounce bullet weight when I'm fishing from the bank. A 1/8 ounce can also work well, but I tend to use a lighter weight whenever there's more open bank, whenever I have more of a hard bottom that I can work with. But something like a Texas rigged worm, you can't go wrong with that. And you can tell by this is a dark worm. This is a Strike King shimmy stick, and it's got that black blue flake with that bright blue tail. These things are money. I love these things. A black blue flake worm is so good, especially when you're fishing water that's got a lot of shade in it, right? You've got the sun overhead. It's at a steeper angle this year, so it's casting longer shadows. That darker worm actually stands out whenever you're dragging the bottom. Now, a natural color like a green pumpkin or watermelon red flake can be a great choice, but I prefer that for other presentations like this guy here. This is the Waco rig. You can obviously fish a wacky rig, but the Waco rig is just such a dependable presentation that I very rarely fish a wacky rig anymore. I can fish this weedlessly. This is that 1/0 EWG. I've got that 16th ounce nail weight here, pushed halfway in, that tungsten nail weight, and it's a great presentation, and it works so well from the bank. It's like a wacky rig, but I'm fishing it in places I would never even think about putting a wacky rig. I can fish it in the thickest cover. I can skip it up under docks. It's a great presentation that, like I said, I don't ever fish a wacky rig anymore. Now, as far as fishing something like, well, this guy here, and this is a jig, and this is one of the jigs that I make. This is in that bitter melon color, right? It's got that orangish, yellowish, and it's got a really green skirt to it. And this is just a casting jig. It's got that wide flat head, and I've got a Guggen Kraken craw on here. And this is a more natural standard presentation that I was using the other day in an area that was bathed in sunlight and didn't have nearly as much vegetation. But when I'm fishing a jig, I'm going to keep that jig much lighter. I won't go over 3/8 of an ounce because I don't need to. Because a heavier jig, while it's great for getting down and staying on the bottom, it's also going to bite into that bottom much more. And you're ending up going to get a lot more slop whether you want to or not, especially from the bank. So a lot of times I'm going with a 3/8 ounce if I've got a little bit deeper, more open water. But if I've got some places where it's got some cover and some structure, I'm going with a 1/4 ounce, like this little bitsy bug right here. Again, black blue flake, black blue jigs. Natural jigs can also work very well, but if I'm fishing areas that have got a lot of cover, a lot of structure, they've got a lot of shade, I tend to go with darker colors. It's what works well for me on my fishery. And I'm fishing clear water. We've got 6 to 8 foot visibility or more. And when your water's only 8 to 10 foot deep, you can see straight to the bottom easily on most of the lake. Something like this is going to work exceptionally well. Now for the trailer, a Ned bait is an amazing trailer on a small jig like this. I love that. That's probably the favorite trailer that I use is half a stick bait or a Ned bait. That's going to be what I'm putting on this for a trailer because in the wintertime, in the fall time, those bass will just munch those types of baits right up. They don't have to be huge. You don't want a lot of flap. It can be very subtle. And A lot of times I'm fishing that almost like a shaky head where I toss it out there and I'm trying to hold it in place and just wiggle it a little bit before I move it. The water's colder, the fish are less active. So I want that slower presentation to try to entice those bass, get their curiosity, and see if I can get a move in and commit. Now, another type of bait that works so well from the bank that a lot of anglers don't even consider is a swim bait. You can fish a swim bait right next to the bank, especially as that water gets colder and you need to have a more subtle, more quiet presentation. Something like this is absolutely killer. This is money. Now, you notice that I don't have it on a swim bait jig head. I've got it on a bitsy flip head. I've taken the skirt off, and you guys a couple years ago started calling this the lowbrow rig. So that's kind of what we've gone on. But from the bank, this is awesome. I've caught so many fish. I can't tell you how many fish I've caught with this little simple setup. This is just, I think this is a 4-inch, might be a 3.5-inch Rage swimmer on it. And you can use a Kitech, you can use H2O Express, you can use whatever you want to as far as a swim bait goes, whatever you feel is your favorite brand. And just put it on a little bitsy flip or a little 1/4-ounce jig head just like this. It doesn't have to be a bitsy flip, doesn't have to be a bitsy bug, but a 1/4-ounce jig head. Now, the reason why I like these is they've got that line tie that's, in line with the hook, and they've got that teardrop head, which slips right through the vegetation. Plus, the brush card also comes in very handy. So I can fish this right up near the bank. I can fish it through a lot of the slop, and it comes through nice and cleanly. But the most important part is I'm catching tons of fish doing that. Now, the last bait that I really like to use from the bank is something that you're going to think is a little bit strange, but it's been a productive one for me for years. That's a jerk bait. Now, this is a Smithwick Rattlin' Rogue. This is the floating one. If you're around this channel a lot, then you already know we call this the cat turd. And I've probably caught more fish with this jerkbait than any other one. I mean, look at it. It's ugly. It's ugly as it can be. The color doesn't make any sense. Why would the fish bite this thing? But they tear it up. And I've got a little split shot right here on the front hook just to slow down how fast it comes up. I want it to be a slow riser rather than a suspending bait, because whenever I'm fishing closer to the bank, a lot of times we're fishing uphill, and I need to keep that in mind. A lot of times I need to pause this. But at the little lake, at the hatchet lake, and at the big lake, this has been money from the bank. I get a lot of guys who tell me lowbrow fishing a jerkbait from the bank is just crazy. You're not going to do anything but get a lot of slop. You're not going to do anything but hang it up. Telling you what, I've done it for a long time, and only thing that I do is catch fish after fish after fish. And the older guys who are fishing things like the old CC shads, the old Cotton Cordell shads, or the Rebel minnows, they will tell you they are money from the bank. Those bass cannot resist them. So there you have it. Bank angling in the fall can be super productive. You can catch more fish right now from the bank than you can probably all year long. Those bass are up shallow and they're setting up in predictable ways. With a few alterations and a few changes to your presentations and how you're working those baits, you can be super successful every single time you head out to the water. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.